Stephen A. Smith leaned forward in his chair, his voice carrying the kind of weight that made everyone watching lean closer to their screens. The set was quiet except for his steady tone, a mixture of authority and warning, as if he knew the words he was about to speak would ripple far beyond the walls of the studio. He straightened his papers, adjusted his tie, and locked his eyes on the camera. "Vanessa Bryant," he began slowly, letting the name sink into the air. "People keep acting like everything is perfect, like she's untouchable, but I'm here to tell you she's not. The truth is, Vanessa Bryant is in deep financial trouble. Bankruptcy is on the horizon. That's the story no one wants to talk about, but I will." His delivery was deliberate, sharp, and unflinching, and the silence that followed inside the studio was deafening. The producers exchanged nervous looks while the live audience gasped, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others staring in stunned silence as though they had just witnessed history being rewritten in real time. The moment his words hit the airwaves, shockwaves spread. Viewers at home sat frozen, replaying the clip again and again to make sure they heard him correctly. Conversations erupted instantly across living rooms and group chats. His voice, usually tied to fiery debates about athletes and games, had suddenly torn open a new kind of controversy, one that touched on grief, legacy, and the hidden cost of fame. Commentators scrambled to make sense of it. Analysts rushed to frame it, but nobody could contain the wildfire. Stephen A. had dropped something that felt less like commentary and more like an accusation. Inside Vanessa Bryant's inner circle, panic spread like a storm. Close friends and family members reached for their phones, sending her the clip within minutes of it airing. She sat silently as the words played, her expression unreadable to those around her. People who knew her well could see the tightening of her jaw, the subtle rise and fall of her breathing, but she offered no immediate response. Her team of advisors and lawyers convened quickly, voices clashing in heated arguments about how to handle the sudden onslaught. Some urged her to strike back publicly and defend her name. Others cautioned patience, warning that a hasty reaction might only keep the story alive longer than necessary. Stephen A. was not backing down. The next morning, as cameras rolled once again, he addressed the backlash head-on. His tone was fiery, confident, and brimming with the conviction of someone who believed he was speaking a necessary truth. "You can come at me all you want," he declared, pounding his fist on the desk for emphasis. "But don't ignore reality. It isn't about disrespect. It isn't about her as a widow or a mother. This is about facts. Lavish spending, lawsuits, settlements, they add up. And the weight of all that is crushing her." His words cut through the noise like a blade, sparking fresh outrage from some and reluctant curiosity from others who began to wonder if he knew something they did in single quotes. It was clear the narrative had shifted. This was no longer just sports commentary. This was a spectacle. Viewers weren't just watching a debate show anymore. They were watching a collision between celebrity image and brutal commentary. Between grief and public perception, between private struggle and public exposure. The stage had been set and the world was waiting to see how Vanessa Bryant would respond. If at all. Vanessa Bryant stayed silent in the immediate aftermath, but the silence only made the noise louder. News crews gathered outside her gated home. Helicopters circled above, hoping for a glimpse. And every flicker of movement near her driveway sent paparazzi cameras snapping in frantic bursts. Inside, her world was tense and heavy. The television in the living room played muted coverage of Stephen A.'s remarks on loop. The scrolling banners filled with speculation about her finances and potential collapse. Her phone buzzed endlessly. With calls she ignored, friends offering sympathy, advisors demanding meetings, journalists begging for comment. The weight of public expectation pressed against her, and the walls of her home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage under relentless spotlight. The frenzy spread across the city, then across the nation. Talk shows that rarely mentioned her name now devoted entire segments to analyzing her situation. Financial experts were invited onto morning programs, breaking down the lawsuits, settlements, lifestyle costs that might support Stephen A.'s claims. Clips of legal analysts speaking with certainty that her fortune could not withstand the pressure gave this story more fuel. Some voices rose to her defense, insisting she was far from financial ruin and that Smith had crossed a line by targeting a grieving widow. Others, emboldened by the spectacle, argued that celebrity wealth often hid fragility. And perhaps this was simply the truth cracking through the facade. Stephen A. himself seemed to thrive on the uproar. He returned to his show with even greater force, declaring that the backlash against him was proof that people were unwilling to face reality. He leaned forward, his tone cutting and deliberate. Everybody wants to protect the image, but nobody wants to admit what's right in front of them. I said what I said because it's true, and no amount of denial is going to change the facts. His co-hosts shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, some trying to rein him in, others wary of standing too close to his fire. The control room hummed with tension, but ratings soared as viewers tuned in not for basketball, but for the unfolding drama that had taken over the show. Behind closed doors, Vanessa's team weighed their options. One camp pushed her to release a calm, measured statement that would shut down the rumors without escalating the fight. Another argued for a legal strike, threatening action against Stephen A. and his network for defamation. A few, however, urged her to do nothing at all, reminding her that sometimes silence was more powerful than any words. Vanessa listened, but her face betrayed little of what she felt inside. She understood the stakes were larger than her name. On it was Kobe's legacy, her children's privacy, and the fragile balance of grief and dignity that was being tested under a microscope. Meanwhile, the public conversation grew harsher. Memes flooded social media. Late-night comedians slipped the controversy into their monologues. And even athletes were asked to weigh in during post-game interviews. Some shook their heads in disgust at Smith's boldness. Others shrugged as, though they had heard whispers before. The lines between entertainment, journalism, and gossip blurred until there was no distinction left. Vanessa Bryant's life, whether she wanted it or not, had become a national storyline. And every hour she remained silent only deepened the mystery. The storm showed no sign of slowing. And all eyes now turned to her, waiting for a word, a gesture, or even the faintest acknowledgement of the accusations hanging over her head. The world wanted an answer, but Vanessa Bryant remained hidden, and her silence was beginning to speak louder than any denial ever could. Days turned into a week, and the silence from Vanessa Bryant could no longer be dismissed as mere hesitation. It had become part of the story itself. Commentators began to describe it as a strategy, some calling it strength, others calling it evasion. The pressure mounted with every headline, every panel discussion, every viral clip dissecting her absence from the conversation. It wasn't just Stephen A.'s claim anymore. It was the snowballing effect of a media machine that thrived on unanswered questions. The longer she stayed quiet, the louder the speculation grew, until even people who had never followed her life before found themselves invested in what her response might be. Finally, on a quiet afternoon, Vanessa stepped into the glare of the cameras. She appeared outside a small venue in Los Angeles where she had been attending a private charity event. Security had tried to usher her past the swarm of reporters, but Vanessa stopped, turned, and faced them. The crowd fell into a sudden hush as microphones extended toward her and flashes lit up her face. She stood tall, her voice calm but firm. "I am aware of the things being said about me," she began, her tone carrying a weight that cut through the noise. "Let me be clear. My family is not bankrupt. My children are secure. Our future is secure, and no amount of speculation will change that. Out of respect for my husband's legacy and out of respect for the truth, I will not allow falsehoods to define us." Her words hung in the air, measured and deliberate, delivered not with anger, but with a quiet authority that demanded attention. The statement lasted less than a minute, but it was enough to change the tone of the story overnight. News outlets replayed the clip endlessly, analyzing her body language, her tone, and the careful precision of her words. Some praised her for showing dignity in the face of provocation, while others insisted she had sidestepped the deeper questions about lawsuits and spending. For her supporters, however, it was enough a clear rebuttal to Stephen A. that restored her voice in a conversation that had threatened to erase her. Stephen A. watched the footage from his studio, his jaw tightening as the clip replayed on the monitor. When he finally went live, he addressed her directly. "Vanessa Bryant has spoken, and I respect that," he said, his voice steady but carrying an edge. "But let me also say this, I don't retract what I said. I don't play games with the truth. She says everything is fine, then let's see it. Show the receipts, show the reality. Until then, I stand by what I reported." The tension crackled once again, as though the air between them had become a battlefield where neither side was willing to retreat. The public was divided more than ever. Half the audience felt Vanessa's brief but powerful statement closed the matter. The other half, spurred on by Stephen A.'s refusal to back down, demanded more proof, more transparency. Television debates stretched late into the night, with experts and insiders arguing about the responsibilities of public figures and the dangers of unchecked commentary. What began as a single fiery claim had transformed into a cultural debate about grief, wealth, privacy, and power in the age of relentless media. And while Vanessa returned to her private world, hoping her words would be enough to put an end to it, the storm had taken on a life of its own. Stephen A. had thrown the first spark, but now the fire burned far beyond his control, and Vanessa Bryant was left to decide whether to retreat from the flames or step directly into them once again. The pressure reached a breaking point when whispers of legal action began to surface. Vanessa's lawyers, who had quietly drafted responses behind closed doors, now considered a more aggressive strategy. Meetings stretched late into the night in sleek downtown offices, as advisors debated whether suing Stephen A. Smith or his network outright would silence the storm or throw gasoline on it. The legal team warned that dragging this into court would only extend the spectacle. But Vanessa's closest confidants argued that her silence and one short statement weren't enough to protect Kobe's legacy from being tarnished. Each option carried risks, and the weight of the decision pressed down on her like an invisible burden. At the same time, executives inside the network that employed Stephen A. were growing restless. Ratings had skyrocketed since the controversy began, but so had the backlash. Sponsors were calling in, some furious at the negative press, others quietly pleased with the attention. The network boardroom was a battlefield of its own, with half the suits demanding Stephen A. tone it down and the other half reminding everyone that no one in the industry drove viewership quite like him. He was their most valuable voice, their stormmaker, their spectacle generator, and they knew muzzling him would spark its own scandal. Yet they couldn't ignore the growing chorus accusing them of exploiting Vanessa's pain for profit. Stephen A. thrived on the pressure. On his next show, he leaned into the controversy with renewed fire. He looked straight into the camera, his words sharp and deliberate. "If Vanessa Bryant wants to take this to court, that's her choice. But I will not apologize for telling the truth. People can call me heartless, they can call me reckless, but what I am is honest. I don't bow to celebrity. I don't bow to image. I speak for reality." His co-hosts sat tense, trying to interject, but often drowned out by his booming declarations. The audience roared with a mix of cheers and jeers, the clash of opinions turning the studio into a theater of conflict. Meanwhile, Vanessa moved carefully in the shadows, aware that every step she took was under surveillance. A paparazzi hounded her when she tried to run errands, cameras flashed as she walked into buildings. An online speculation magnified even the smallest detail of her daily life. A shopping bag, a luxury car, a friend's visit, everything was dissected as evidence of wealth or ruin. She found herself living in a glass cage, her grief and dignity tested under the world's gaze. Her children, too young to fully grasp the chaos, sensed the tension. The fortress she had built around her family's privacy was cracking under the relentless pressure. The cultural conversation began to spiral beyond Vanessa, and Stephen A. Celebrities weighed in, some siding with her, condemning the attack as cruel, others nodding subtly toward Stephen A.'s claims, hinting at stories they had heard in Hollywood's backrooms. Talk shows brought on financial analysts who claimed to have studied her situation in detail, speaking in clipped, confident tones about numbers no one outside her inner circle had truly seen. Every new opinion was treated as fact, and every fact blurred into entertainment. The line between truth and narrative disintegrated until the controversy itself became the spectacle, feeding on its own momentum. And through it all, Vanessa considered her next move. She had spoken once, briefly, with calm control, but now the stakes had risen higher. Legal threats loomed, the media roared, and Stephen A. showed no signs of retreating. The question was no longer whether she would respond again, but how. Would she strike publicly with undeniable evidence of her stability, shattering the rumors in one decisive blow? Or would she take the fight into the courts, turning a media storm into a legal war? The world held its breath, waiting for her answer. The moment came quietly, but with the precision of a calculated strike. Early one morning, before the news cycle had fully awakened, Vanessa Bryant's lawyers filed a formal notice against both Stephen A. Smith and the network that broadcast his claims. The filing wasn't just a vague threat, it was a pointed accusation of defamation, emotional distress, and reckless disregard for the truth. Within minutes of the documents hitting the courthouse system, the press seized on it, splashing headlines. Across every major outlet, reporters swarmed the courthouse, cameras capturing the flurry of papers as though they were evidence of a war beginning. It was no longer speculation or rumor. Vanessa had chosen her battlefield, and it was the courtroom. The news sent shockwaves through the network. Executives convened in an emergency meeting, their polished conference room buzzing with frantic voices. Some urged immediate damage control, others argued to stand behind their star host, but all of them understood the stakes had shifted. This wasn't just a ratings controversy anymore. This was a legal fight that could cost millions, and perhaps more damaging, their reputation. Internal memos leaked to the press hinted at a growing divide, with whispers that some in the company wanted Stephen A. suspended to ease the heat, while others insisted silencing him would look like an admission of guilt. Stephen was unshaken. On air that very evening, he opened the show with a fiery declaration that left no room for doubt about his stance. "You can sue me. You can try to silence me. But you will not erase the truth," he thundered, leaning into the camera as if speaking directly into Vanessa's living room. His voice grew sharper, his gestures more forceful, each sentence designed to pierce through the growing storm around him. "This is not about disrespect. This is about accountability. And if standing up for reality makes me the villain, then I'll wear that title proudly." His words set the studio ablaze with energy, the audience torn between admiration for his defiance and outrage at his audacity. Vanessa, meanwhile, kept her composure. Unlike Stephen A., she refused to play the spectacle on television screens. Her legal team orchestrated her moves with precision, releasing carefully worded statements that reinforced her commitment to protecting her family's legacy. She appeared only in controlled settings, charity events, foundation meetings, where her presence spoke louder than any press conference. Photographs of her walking confidently into these venues, her children by her side, became powerful symbols that contradicted the image of financial ruin painted by her critics. Her silence on camera was not weakness. With strategy, each word withheld, sharpening the impact of her legal action. The public became more divided than ever. Some praised Vanessa for taking a stand, calling her lawsuit a shield against the cruelty of media speculation. Others rallied behind Stephen A., admiring his refusal to bow even when the legal system bore down on him. The debate spilled into homes, workplaces, and social feeds, transforming into a national argument about freedom of speech, the limits of commentary, and the cost of celebrity. Each side dug in deeper, the clash escalating until it felt less like a scandal and more like a cultural trial playing out in real time. Court dates loomed, each one promising new revelations. Rumors of financial documents, private settlements, and testimony from insiders swirled in anticipation. The spectacle that began with one sentence on live television had evolved into a full-scale war, with both sides determined to emerge not just victorious, but vindicated. The cameras would not look away, the world would not stop watching. And Vanessa Bryant and Stephen A. Smith were now locked in a battle neither could afford to lose.